Hi everybody, time to talk about population growth practice, or more specifically, how you can look at a graph showing the birth and death rates and use it to determine whether a population is growing or shrinking at any particular time. So in order to do that, we need to know some basic facts, and this is what I want to address here. The birth rate versus the death rate determines whether population is shrinking or growing. In this instance, we're ignoring other factors like immigration or emigration and focusing on an ideal population that has nobody coming, nobody leaving, just being born and dying. So, given that, one needs to memorize some basic things. One, birth rate and death rate determine population growth in such a situation, which means if the birth rate is higher than the death rate, you will always have a population that is growing, or in this case, I guess we'll go with grows. If the death rate is higher, then the population shrinks. Watch the phrasing though, because if I phrase it this way, instead of telling you which one's higher, telling you which one's lower, you need to still understand it. If the birth rate is lower, that is the same as saying that the death rate is higher. And if the death rate is higher, then the population shrinks. Because all that matters is which one's higher than the other. If there are fewer born than dying, the population is shrinking. Death rate is lower than birth rate is the same as birth rate is higher than death rate. Same idea. If the birth rate exceeds the death rate, then the population grows. Now, regardless how you phrase it, if birth rate and death rate are the same, then we say the population is stable, which means neither growing nor shrinking. So, if we take that into consideration, let's look at a graph showing a real country of Russia and look at 3 points in time. And each of those points in time, you should be able to tell whether the birth and death rates indicate a growing, shrinking, or stable population. So let's do this one so that you can use this example to do this one. All right, Russia. One thing that's important, let's be aware that mortality means death rate. Birth rate is the dotted line, death rate, the solid line. That means we need to understand death rate is this one and birth rate is this one. So you got to keep straight which one is which. Don't worry about what direction the line is going. That makes no difference. All you care about is in any given year, is the birth rate higher or the death rate higher? So in 1980, let's find out a graph that's here. And to make it easier, I'm just going to draw a straight line up from 1980 so that we can compare the death rate, which is way down here, and the birth rate, which is way up here. Who cares what direction the line is going? All you care is that the birth rate is above the death rate. If the birth rate is higher, then you say, well, first of all, birth rate higher. And if birth rate is higher, that means population growing. 1991, let's find that. 1990 is right here, 1995 is here. So 1991 is roughly here. That's 1991. Notice the lines cross. That means birth rate is equal to death rate. So birth rate is equal to death rate, which means population, oops, almost pointed the wrong one, stable. When birth and death rate are equal, population is neither growing nor shrinking. Okay, 2005. So you find 2005, that's this right here. So I draw a line straight up. Ignore the fact that the line's going up. All you care is death rate is higher than birth rate. Since death rate is higher, we'll write death rate is higher, which means population shrinking. Again, ignore the direction of the graph. All you care is which one's higher, birth rate or death rate. Now, you'll do the same for yours, noting which is the death rate line and which one's the birth rate line. Whichever one's higher determines for that particular year whether the population of New Zealand is growing or shrinking. You can follow the same ideas as here in order to do this one here. In addition to that task, you'll also be looking at this task, color coding a graph to show during which years the population is growing, which one is shrinking. So population growing, this lighter, what it's saying is during years 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, all the way up to here, population is growing. Why is it growing? Because look at the key. death rate is below the birth rate. In all these years, the birth rate is above the death rate. So population growing. Here, the death rate is now above the birth rate, which is why it's population shrinking. Here, the birth rate is higher, population growing. Here, the death rate is higher, population shrinking. You're going to take this same idea and apply it to these graphs down here. We're going to color code these. So I'll show you one, you can do the other. Well, this one and the other. In order to do that, one thing that's kind of helpful to notice, check this out. Do you notice that wherever the lines cross, it changes from one color to the other? Because whenever the lines cross, it goes from either shrinking to growing or from growing to shrinking. So to make that easier to color, I'm going to start with that. I'm going to begin by drawing lines wherever these cross. Like, see how the dotted line and the solid line cross here? I'm going to put a straight line right here because this is where it transitions from one color to the other, as in from growing to shrinking or from shrinking to growing. The two lines also cross here, and they cross here. Try to be straight, do your best, but no one's expecting perfection. And they also cross here. So it's got to be a straight line though, okay? Because just like here, you're going to say during what years is it growing, what years is it shrinking. So is this set of years growing or is it shrinking? In order to figure that out, we've got to look at what it is. Okay, the death rate's down here. That's the dotted line. The birth rate's up here. So in any given year, the death rate is below the birth rate. The birth rate's above the death rate. If birth rate is higher, population's growing. So let's pick a color. I picked green for population growing. And I guess I'll use this other color for population shrinking. Since birth rate is higher, I'm going to color this the population growing color. Who cares that the line's going downward? Doesn't matter. If the birth rate's above the death rate, that's all that matters, population growing. Where else is, since I've got this color in hand, where else is the population growing? Well, see, birth rate's the solid line. It's above the death rate here, so this is also population growing. No need to worry about being excessively neat, just get the idea across. Hey, look, here also the birth rate is above the death rate, so population growing here too. All right, looking at these, look, the death rate is higher during all these years. Here, the death rate is higher during all these years. Since the death rate is higher, population shrinking. In this case, I have chosen blue as the population shrinking color. You can pick any color you want. These are just the two I happen to have on hand. And that's how you color code the graphs to show that during these years, population grows, during these years it shrinks, during these years it grows, during these years it shrinks, and during these years it grows. You can do likewise with the other one here. And that's how you do it.